Hello and welcome. I am so excited. I am Stephanie Abbu, and I am privileged to have the opportunity to congratulate you on behalf of the Academy of Neonatal Nursing for being inducted into the Hall of Fame. Dr. Terese Verklan, congratulations.
Thank you so much. It was really quite a surprise. I had no idea that that existed.
We're so honored to be able to spend time with you today and to learn more about your career in neonatal nursing. What got you started on this path?
Well, actually, it was an accident. I did not like nursing at all. And when I graduated with my baccalaureate degree, I was studying engineering. And a very good friend of mine transferred from the unit she was working on to the neonatal intensive care unit. And she said, "You need to come down here." And I went, "Oh, God, no. Babies? Oh, no. Their parents look at you." Because when I did my peds rotation, and parents are looking at you and you're starting an IB, and it's like, I didn't want that. But she said, "No, this is different. You only get one patient and they're paralyzed. You only do things every 2 hours." Like, okay. So after I transferred over and after about 6 months, just fell in love with it and just went from there wanting to have a nurse practitioner and then decided to be a clinical nurse specialist instead and went to work with Sheldon Coronis back in the day. Now I'm aging myself. And at that time, he had the largest intensive care nursery in the United States. And then I decided from a friend talking, I need a PhD. And so I went back to University of Pennsylvania for that degree too. So it just one thing after another. I never really thought, oh, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this. It just evolved.
Wow, that's exciting. You sort of never know where conversations or who you interact
Mm,
with are going to take you for sure. So,
yes.
as you grew and began to get involved in research and how did you end up involved in some of your writing and your research? What sparked the passion or how did you get involved in that work?
Well, what started that was my love for Star Trek. It was the original series only. I don't like any of the other knockoffs. And I actually have a 6 foot, a life-size Spock in my office that startles people because he's sitting there looking at you. But I wanted to know how babies developed in outer space. And because my hypothesis was that since they weren't exposed to gravity, they would not develop a left ventricle that would be successful enough in pumping out cardiac output. So we have to know what to do in microgravity situations. And that's really what started my interest in research. And then I got introduced to Barbara Medoff Cooper, who was doing a lot of work with NIH at the time. She was my chair for my dissertation. So she taught me a lot about research. I was her project manager and her assistant, and we worked together for quite a while. And again, one thing just led to another. I was interested in heart rate variability because they asked me who was going to give me $27 trillion to do my dissertation. So I had to come up with something else. And that took me to the University of Houston. I worked at the University of Texas at Houston, but developed connections with the University of Houston, who had a very advanced engineering department. And we had grants from NIH, and we needed to increase our equipment. We were doing something there was only 6 labs in the entire world that were doing what we were doing, measuring the magnetic field around the fetus's heart so that we could really see what was going on without being invasive. But they wouldn't increase our equipment strength. And so then I went in a different pattern. But it was quite a fun time.
That is really cool. So, where did you head next? Where did that take you?
That took me to thinking about retiring, and that was back in 2010. And I really decided I was going to retire because of the GE Middle East wanting me to come and be a consultant with them and increase the standard of care given at their NICUs across Saudi. And then we were planning to go to Jordan and a few other countries after that. And so I retired to go and pursue that.
Well, tell us more about that. That sounds like quite an adventure and what an opportunity to have an impact for babies across the world.
Right, it really was. Everybody was quite surprised that GE had that medical piece attached to it, not just its equipment, but education. And the hospitals that are in the major cities were in really good shape. The hospitals that were in smaller places were really bad. Some of the nurses would have a charge nurse would be in charge, have to do all the charge nurse duties, and look after 13 neonatal patients. It's like, no, 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 let's, start looking at staffing and things. And their education wasn't up. Uh, Teaching nurses about respiratory, they taught them how to clean the ventilator. That was their respiratory education. It's like, no, we're changing that too. So little things like that that made a difference. And the nurses really enjoyed the changes because they could practice nursing. Most of them were from different countries where they knew how to work with sick babies. India had a lot of nurses, and Thailand had a lot of nurses, and they already were trained, but weren't allowed to do what they were supposed to do because they're cleaning ventilators.
Wow. What were some of the barriers that you faced in implementing those changes and bringing the science of nursing forward there?
I really did not face any big barriers. Some of the physicians were a little reluctant to have nurses perform more nursing duties. They were a little threatened by that. But I was representing the Ministry of Health, and that carried a lot of weight. So they really had to kind of follow what I was suggesting because it was coming directly from the Ministry of Health. And we had one physician, I remember, he was so rude. This poor nurse was so nervous trying to make a presentation. He was so rude. He's talking through it and doing things. And so then it's the next day and it's time for my presentation and he's doing the same thing. And I just kind of looked at him. And when I went back to Riyadh and met with the minister, I said, that guy is not helping nursing at all. He was fired immediately.
Wow.
Yeah.
Took that
Yeah. So,
seriously.
right. So I did not have too many barriers at all. When people knew who I was representing, and most of them were quite eager for the changes.
Hmm. Yeah, I imagine that you saw such a tremendous impact
Right.
on those patients and families.
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
fabulous. How long were you there?
Um, Off and on for, oh gosh, I don't know how many years. 5 years, 6 years.
Wow.
And they had just asked me a couple of times to come back. They're starting up a new initiative. And I said, I've not been practicing now for some time. And if you're not in the NICU for 6 months, you are out of date because things change so fast. And I just said, sorry, sorry. So they're looking for somebody else, I think.
Gotcha. Yeah, you're right. Things certainly do change so
Mhm.
quickly. What has been one of the most significant changes that you've seen or been a part of?
Oh, probably the most significant thing is the ability to look after extremely preterm babies. Um, when I started working, sending home our first intact 28-weeker made the major headlines in the newspaper because it was just so rare. I mean, we didn't know what we were doing with babies back then. With kids that were going to develop PPHN, we would sit there and watch them because we knew at 12 to 18 hours that kid was going to be sicker than a dog and we'd have to really get in there. Well, now we understand the physiology. So you never let any baby get to be in that shape. We called that the honeymoon period back then.
Hmm.
Nobody sees that anymore because we know what we're dealing with.
Mm.
The other things, the ventilators. We have so much better ventilators that work with the babies instead of just, giving them breast when they think. But this is also going to date me. We didn't really have good ventilators for babies back when I started. And so my job sometimes might be to hand ventilate a baby for that 12 hours I was working. And we used the anesthesia bags so you could tell the difference in the resistance in those babies' lungs. And our kids didn't have BPD. It wasn't until the ventilators arrived that, what's going on in this kid's lung that
Mm-hmm.
we started having BPD.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was so impressed to learn about all of your clinical and research publications and all that you've had an opportunity to do and to share of that information. What are you the most proud of, and how did you get involved as co-editor for the core curriculum of neonatal intensive care nursing?
Well, I was on the board of A1, the journal, a jogging, board of jogging. And we were having a meeting, and this one person kept looking at me, and I thought, am I doing something wrong? What's happening? And after the end of the meeting, it lasted a couple of days. She said, would you mind staying behind? And it's like, okay, they're going to kick me off the board or something. And so it was Faye Racina, and she said, we're looking for a new editor for core curriculum. Would you like to do that? And I was like, whoa, yeah, I think I would. And can I think about it for the weekend? And she said, sure. And as soon as I got home, I picked up the phone and called Marlene and said, guess what you're going to be doing? And that's how we got to be the co-editors.
That's so great. That's so great. I got to spend some time with her as well. It has been such a privilege to get to learn more about the history of neonatal nursing and the journey that you all have been through. And I have been fortunate enough in my career to benefit from a lot of the work that you all have put forward. Definitely, my time as a nurse, even over the past 20 years, has been very different than it potentially could have been with what we've been able to do and learn.
Mhm.
What advice do you have for a nurse that's interested in becoming a neonatal nurse or a new neonatal nurse that's interested in getting into research and publication?
Don't say no. I never said no to anything, and kind of follow what your passion is. I'm still working part-time, and my friends are always like, why are you still working? Because I love it. I don't see it as work. I enjoy that intellectual stimulation with graduate students. It's not work. So think of that for your career. What you're doing is not work. It's a pleasure. It's a passion. And then just keep evolving. Just don't say no.
That's great. That's great. Any advice for how they might translate their research or their findings into practice and how they might overcome some of those barriers?
Well, it really just depends. If you're doing evidence-based practice, you may have a bit more of a struggle because so many facilities these days have lack of resources. Back in the day, nurses were always sent to conferences. The hospital paid for it. You'd send two or three or five nurses at a time, and now most hospitals don't do that anymore. If you want to make a practice change, make sure it's in line with the institution's mission or the department NICU's vision for where they want to go. And if you want to do research, then go get a PhD. That will really open the doors. You'll find good mentors to help you work, help you learn how to write grants because the grants have become so competitive now that's just insane. And again, study what you want to study. I wanted to study babies in outer space, and okay, I couldn't do that. So then I went down this next path thinking it would lead me back to that. So it's all been connected.
Wow, that's really great. When you talk about conferences and you talk about involvement on boards and professional organizations, what importance do you see professional organizations having had an impact on your career?
Oh, it's been major, absolutely major. When the National Association of Neonatal Nurses started, I belonged right away. And of course, there was no internet back then. I hate to be dating myself, but we all met face to face for meetings, different places around the country. And actually, that's where I met Marlene, way, way before I had a master's degree. And we worked together on various committees. And so, because neonatal nursing was so young then, you knew everybody within a couple of years. I'm glad the profession is growing, but I think the same advice holds. Get involved with your organizations, get on committees. Once you publish a paper, get on your journal's editorial board, ask to be a reviewer. Just keep going. The networking and support is absolutely astronomical.
That's fantastic advice.
Mhm.
Anything else that you would like to share before I close us out?
I don't think so. I'm just truly honored and quite surprised, but thank you very much for the honor.
We are so excited to be able to recognize your commitment to the babies and to the families. What a difference you have been able to make in your career and the career of those that have used the information that you have put out and that you have helped to guide. Your global impact is amazing. And I am so excited that I got to have the opportunity to spend time with you, to learn from you, and to be able to honor you. So, congratulations again on being
Thank you very
inducted
much.
into Ann's Hall of Fame. And look forward to recognizing you in person. And again, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much.